Hello everyone, and let's get started for the Preparing for the 2012 Taxonomy webinar. I want to start with a couple of housekeeping items. Your questions are welcomed and will be addressed at the end of the webinar. You'll have questions throughout the webinar as we're talking either about the taxonomy or our software. Please just submit your questions through the chat box in the WebEx feature, and those will go to the host so you can ask us any question. As time permits, we'll be addressing your questions at the end of the webinar. Otherwise, we'll try to follow up after the webinar. To ensure quality, we have turned off your WebEx phone, so you'll only be hearing from the presenters. If you have any technical difficulty, please use that chat dialog box and reach out to us, and we will get your questions and concerns addressed as soon as possible. And at the end of the webinar, we'll send you the slide deck that we'll be using. And thank you. And with that, we'll start the actual presentation. So the presentation is Preparing for the 2012 Taxonomy. My name is Jordan Woodard. I'm the Senior Compliance Manager here at Rivet Software, and we are fortunate to be joined by Matherne from the Financial Accounting Standards Board. He is the Chief of Taxonomy Development. During this presentation, we will be covering the summary of major changes from the 2011 to the 2012 taxonomy. Since Lewis is the Chief of Taxonomy Development, he'll actually talk to you about the specific changes from the FASB's point of view. He'll also give us some more guidance about how to use the taxonomy, what types of changes there are, how it affects the way you do modeling, element selection. Lewis will cover a majority of the guidance for using the 2012 taxonomy. And at the end, I will show you how Crossfire supports the 2012 taxonomy and how that affects both self-filers and full-service clients. And we'll do that via a web demo of Crossfire. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Lewis.
Thank you, Jordan. Just waiting for this to sync over. Can you see my desktop now?
Yes, we see it. Thank you, Lewis.
Thanks, Jordan. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of the changes that we've made in the 2012 taxonomy release. I'm required to start with the usual disclaimer. All views expressed are my personal views and are not intended to represent any views of the FASB. FASB positions are established only after extensive due process and deliberation. Additionally, the FASB does not endorse commercial product. So with that out of the way, let's talk about the taxonomy and the changes that have been made in the 2012 release. We update the taxonomy primarily for accounting standard updates that have been finalized and become effective since the 2011 release. And that would be for effective periods ending after December 15, 2011. There were 8 ASUs resulting in changes. Those are accounting standard updates resulting in changes for disclosure and other presentation requirements. Additionally, we observe topic and industry areas for common reporting practices. This is an important part of our effort here. We analyze company filings and extension concepts which result in updates of modeling structure and the rationalization of elements and dimensions, again, based on the usage patterns that we observe. There are also a number of changes to elements, including deprecations, new elements, and changes to references and definitions in the UGT that result from both these common reporting practices as well as ASU. All of these changes are documented in the release notes related to the 2012 UGT, which you can find on the website. This year we have developed a new tool called the TC app to help you further identify these changes relative to your specific extension taxonomy. The slide you're seeing now is the more material ASU changes that have been made. The ASU fair value measurement resulted in 99 new elements in the current release. and 154 deprecated. Comprehensive income, not quite so much, and the ASU for multi-employer plans as well. These are the ones of the 8 I mentioned that had the most impact on the taxonomy from an ASU perspective. The next slide are some of the other ASU changes that we had. These aren't nearly as impactful, but again, it's very important that we make sure we get US GAAP into the taxonomy, and these have been addressed as well. Further details of these changes, such as reference changes and modifications to the definitions, can be found on our website in the release notes and other supporting documents. So I encourage everyone to take a close look at those release notes. Don't be overwhelmed by them. While they seem voluminous, the first few pages are the key pages, so give those a read. Talking about common reporting practices, again, we put considerable amount of energy into looking at how filers are actually using the taxonomy. When the taxonomy was initially built, we had very little practice to follow, and now we can look at how it's being used. This is something we will do on a perpetual basis as we release as the Accounting Standards Board releases new ASUs, and we will look at how they're being implemented to make sure that they're being addressed properly within the taxonomy. We'll look at some of these a little bit more closely. Some of the updated modeling we made resulted in the creation of new dimensions and elements. We will also look at a specific example here around commitments and contingencies. We also added several elements for rolling maturity schedules for quarterly disclosures, which some filers elect to do. Again, we noted this based on our observation. And where we saw duplicative elements and dimensions, we eliminated those redundancies. So, for example, we will take a look at intangible assets and financial instruments as a good example of this rationalization. So here with commitments and contingencies, you can see that we created new elements for items that we found a high rate of extension. So in this case, it was number of defendants and plaintiffs, damages awarded and damages paid. So litigation status axis was added to indicate whether the litigation is pending or threatening. In this example, as I mentioned before, the maturity schedules. So this was added to capture the reporting of the quarterly disclosures when the maturity is based on the latest quarterly balance sheet. These rolling maturity schedules were added to a variety of different areas. Again, this was a common reporting practice. Not everyone does it, but enough filers were doing it that we thought it prudent to include it in the taxonomy. This is a specific example for a long-term debt maturity schedule. So this, again, could be used for quarterly disclosures where the maturity periods are based on that quarter's balance sheet date. In this case, the maturity periods would roll ahead each following quarter by another 3 months. These elements should not be used for the annual disclosure. This maturity schedule may be used for quarterly disclosures if they are based on the last annual balance sheet date. The maturity periods would remain static until the next annual disclosure. So depending on how the disclosure is structured for the quarter, these schedules or the rolling schedules would be used. However, these elements are the appropriate concepts to be used for your annual disclosure. The rolling element should not be used for the annual disclosure. So moving on to rationalization of dimensions, we're going to look at a couple of examples. So the axis for finite-lived intangible assets by major class has the same members, whether they are currently existing or were acquired. The line items distinguish between currently existing and acquired finite-lived intangibles. Therefore, the dimensions by major class can be the same. So this was a case of redundancy, and we were able to clean this up by simply using the same dimension or axis in these two use cases. So this example, you can see where a number of dimensions that had the same underlying concept by type of financial instruments to disaggregate or qualify the line items. By rationalizing into one dimension, it provides a more streamlined structure. Now we're going to move into some of the supporting materials here. We have a lot of supporting material on the website. As I noted before, oops, my computer has a mind of its own. Sorry about that. The changes that were made in the 2012 update can be found in the release notes on our website, FASB.org. If you click on the FASB XBRL tab and then the 2012 taxonomy is shown, then click on the link to the release notes, you'll find a PDF file that with all the release notes there. We also provide these in separate Excel files, which I personally find a whole lot more useful, but some people like the PDFs. Here you'll see an example. Sorry guys, I'm not entirely sure why my computer has a mind of its own here. I'm going to try and stick on this slide here if I can. So changes that are made to the elements are identified in the change label, and you will see some examples here. As you see in the top box, the change label indicates this was an element that was deprecated. If there's a suggested replacement, you will find it here in the deprecated label. If the change in the 2012 UGT update is a result of an ASU, then the change label will identify the ASU and all related changes. So for example, in the bottom box, you see a new element was created for the fair value measurement ASU. On the website as well, you'll see that we have a shared search function. I don't have it on this screen, but we have a shared search function that helps you quickly identify all of the different types of changes. So you can find out whether it's a new element, whether it relates to a specific ASU, a definition change, and so forth. It's all broken down at a very granular level. The same information is contained within the release notes, but you can get it right here on the website. Also, on the website are other supporting documents that help you determine the changes. You can reach these by clicking on the XBRL tab in the upper right corner, and then the 2012 US GAAP Financial Reporting Taxonomy link on the left side. This brings you to the supporting screen you see here, and then click on the link Guidance and Supporting Documents. One of the documents you will find is an Excel version of changes to the taxonomy, as shown here in the modifications to the taxonomy link. This provides you with tabs for each type of change, such as deprecations, reference changes, and label changes that you can filter or manage through the Excel function. This is a section of the file in the tab for definition changes, which will show you the changes to the definitions with strikeouts for deleted words and new words underlined. This should help you determine if this element is still appropriate for the concept you are changing. Generally, the definition changes were made to provide clarity and consistency. So we get a lot of feedback on the definition changes, and I do understand the concerns this creates for users. So we've been trying to be as diligent as we can about the nature of the changes and communicating that as best we can. If we make a change where we just add a period or even a comma or some sort of typographical sort of change, which is obviously not critical from a user perspective, I still hear from users that it's something they're expected to review. And so while it's difficult for us to make those changes go away, we can at least provide clear documentation. And you'll also see with the TC app that we've provided a mechanism to at least help you more quickly see those changes as they relate to your extension. And so that's also available on the website, the TC app or the FASB XBRL extension Taxonomy Change Application, TCAP for short. It's available here. There's a user guide as well, which provides you instructions on downloading and using this tool. This is not a terribly sophisticated tool in terms of some of the user interfaces you might be used to experiencing, but it is intended to provide you a quick mechanism for identifying the changes. Looking at this a little bit more closely, after you've installed it, you can simply open your extension taxonomy either directly from your desktop or from the SEC system, and you select the UGT. You then select the UGT release that it relates to, and it will show you the changes. You can then save it as into Microsoft Excel. You'll see for each of the elements in the extension taxonomy whether there is a change or deprecation to that element. You will need to replace it if it's deprecated, and review changed elements to make sure they are still appropriate for use. So again, this application will show you very quickly all of the changes that have occurred that directly impact your extension taxonomy. Now, it will not show you those changes that don't impact your taxonomy, which you should be aware of, but it at least helps you quickly get to those things that have direct impact. So now I'm going to switch gears a little bit, and I would like to talk to you about using XBRL dimensions. So a couple of years ago, this was probably one of the most poorly understood XBRL functions. Very few people had a good grasp of what it was or how to use it. We quickly got past that, at least in terms of understanding that XBRL dimensions are just a method for modeling tabular information, much as you would do in Excel. And for those of you that are used to using pivot tables, you would get dimensions very, very quickly. But with that big increase in understanding, we've also seen an increase in inappropriate use, which we'd like to address here today. I'm going to start with a quick refresh and an overview of dimensions. So a dimension includes the following elements: the table element, which is what I think of as the container for the tabular information; the dimension, which we often refer to as an axis, so you'll hear me use those terms interchangeably, dimension and axis. And the axis defines the intersection of two domains. A table can and frequently has multiple dimensions, so if you think of it as including an X, Y, and Z axis, or like an Excel pivot table. And then a domain, which describes a set of things with at least one common attribute. Think of it as a common attribute might be types of investment. And then the domain member are the elements that possess that common attribute, so one of the investment instruments. And finally, the primary line items that are modified in the tabular data by the dimensions and domains. And so those could be virtually anything: revenues, expenses, balance sheet items, and so on and so forth. So visually, it could look something like this. In this example, we're using property, plant, and equipment, which is always a good example to show how all these pieces fit together. A table is most commonly used to disaggregate a thing into component parts, as you can see here. So we've taken what we see on the left are three line items: property, plant, and equipment, accumulated depreciation, property, plant, and equipment net, and they're disaggregated with the domain members, land, building, equipment, and that is all within the domain for property, plant, and equipment, and the axis and into the table. Some common uses for dimensions, as I said before, the disaggregation of one or more dimensions. So, for example, revenue by product line, geography, or segment. That's the typical use, and I would say in the US GAAP Taxonomy, the UGT, it is certainly something north of 95% of all dimensions, maybe virtually 100%. There are a handful of cases where we use dimensions specifically to link related fact values to facilitate consumption. And we can also use dimensions to apply attributes to differentiate reported fact values. Dimensions are located throughout the taxonomy, but we have some dimensions, common dimensions as we think of them, located in extended link rule 194 and so an example of some of those are here. And so we can see major customers, geography axis, and so on. So these dimensions, and this is true of all dimensions within the taxonomy, can be used for any table where appropriate. And I want to emphasize where appropriate. We sometimes get into trouble when we say you can use a dimension anywhere where appropriate, and then we find out that some people's definition of appropriate is different than our definition of appropriate. But the point is that if the dimension and its definition makes sense for your particular application, you should be using that rather than extending it to make it specific to the table. One of the things we will see commonly done is the extension of a geography axis to make it specific to the table. It's not necessary. You should use the geography axis in any scenario where you are looking at something by geography. The geography axis will work for that purpose. So let's look at some examples here just to clarify. So this example is by major customer. So in this table, there is a single line item, revenue, broken down by major customer. And you would simply use the major customer axis to tag that breakdown. I would not want to create an extension here. Similarly, as we discussed before, we have a geography axis here. And so in this case, you would use the geography axis. Also, we've noticed that many filers have created extension elements for the country. This is not necessary. The SEC provides a taxonomy that includes elements for countries that should be used for this modeling. We do now include, as an import within the US GAAP taxonomy, those elements, so they should be easier to discover. I think part of the problem in the 2011 release is they were not so easy to find, so we've made sure that they're available. This is a different example for using dimensions, which is the range axis. We often need to identify the minimum and maximum in a range, and this is how you would do it as opposed to creating another line item. So you would be tagging the values with the minimum and the maximum members, but using the same line item for that particular reported concept. So I want to talk a little bit about some inappropriate uses that we've seen. In this example, the filer used members to spell out a maturity schedule. In the UGT modeling, we do not consider this an appropriate use of dimensions. Basically, we have a fundamental rule we follow that says if we can reasonably anticipate the fact that needs to be reported, we provide line items, and that's what you can see here. This, of course, should be used with an appropriate dimension in member. In this example, the filer used a dimension to identify the quarterly financial data. This isn't required as the context, that is the reporting period, identifies the quarterly data. So there's no reason to include an additional dimension that becomes redundant and confusing to the ultimate consumer. And similarly, here we have an inappropriate use of dimension where, in this case, a business segment is the appropriate dimension since that's what they're trying to disaggregate and not the quarterly financial data. These are a few other examples of inappropriate dimensions in the UGT. You might see these in other non-US GAAP taxonomies. It's important to note that if you're exposed to different taxonomies from around the world, they often have different requirements for their local jurisdiction, and they model things in somewhat different ways. For us, these would not be appropriate dimensions. So the last one we talked about, the maturity dimension, it's a time dimension. We do not model that. We do not model the time dimension as members. We put those as line items. I say that knowing that there's at least one or two exceptions to that within the taxonomy, but as a general practice, that's what you should expect to see here. So I'm going to switch gears again, and we're now going to talk about definition structure. I'm going to pick up a little speed here because I'm mindful of the clock, and I want to make sure we get through this and get to some questions, and I know that Jordan has some things for you. So basically, with the definitions, we recognized about a year ago that users were interpreting definitions different than we had intended. And at the same time, we recognized that our definitions, which had effectively, back in 2007, had been written by, dare I say, a committee of 100 people, resulted in a lot of different writing styles. And so we've been highly focused on getting these definitions in a more structured format and in a clear, understandable format. We also anticipate publishing some guidance around this, so that much of what I'm sharing today will be in a document on our website that you can read to understand what we're trying to do. So where we ended up is our definitions have a structure that contains these components. Now, they may not contain all of these components. If exclusions and formats, as an example, are not required for the particular definition, you won't find them. But description of data type will be there, except for members, and description of the financial reporting concept. So here, the different data types require different units of measure. So one of the things we do here is we make sure that we provide within the definition, right up front, a lead-in that tells you what it is. So a monetary element would start out with amount or fair value, for example. And since that is a unit of measure for those elements, there are a few examples here as well, a little different. We have area item type, integer item type. You can see that these would be the sorts of lead-ins that you should expect. There are always exceptions, so you may see something different, but understand that this is the practice we're using going forward. Additionally, this is only in effect with the 2012 release. So when we touch a definition, we will make these changes, but there's still many legacy definitions that we have not yet changed. So generally, the financial reporting concept includes the description. It will follow what is in the codification, but it's not intended to replicate the codification. We stay away from providing measurement guidance or tagging guidance. We're really focused on just describing the thing. If you need additional guidance beyond that, you should be referring to the codification. Inclusions and definitions assist you in differentiating between certain elements to assure the correct element is selected from two or more possible choices. Inclusions are also used to list examples of what the element encompasses as a matter of clarity, such as different types of debt securities or type of properties, plant, and equipment. One of the things we've seen here over the last couple of years is, in some of the feedback we've heard, is that, well, if the thing I'm trying to report is not included in the examples, or the examples uncover something that is not in my concept, then the user, the preparer, is concluding that the element does not fit their requirement. That is not our intent. Our intent is that these are examples, and those examples are there just to illustrate and to help direct the user. Exclusions assist you in differentiating between certain elements to assure the correct element is selected from two or more possible choices. Broadly speaking, indefinite-lived intangible assets includes goodwill, but the taxonomy contains specific elements to report facts associated with goodwill that should not be used interchangeably with the indefinite-lived intangible asset element. That would be an exclusion. And last but not least, certain element data types in the taxonomy require facts to be reported using ISO standards. These are standards promulgated by the International Organization for Standardization. The first example shows the ISO convention for elements that have a data type of date item type. So a fact value for April 3rd, 2012 would be reported as 2012-04-03. That's a format most of us are comfortable with and have seen quite commonly. However, the second example is for examples with data type of duration item type. This is when you disclose facts that are a period of time, as in the contract runs for 2 years, as opposed to a specific date. The element follows an ISO convention as well. So here, the P1 Y5M13D, this means 1 year, 5 months, and 13 days. For the 2012 taxonomy, we have added 65 elements that have a data type of duration item type. Most, if not all, of these additions replaced existing elements that were modeled as decimal, integer, or other types. So again, in these situations where you have these kind of modeling requirements, we've included this information in the definition to make it clear the direction you should be going. Pulling this all together, this is what you might expect to see. This is the pattern on the way we assemble the parts. So we'll always start with a description of data type. It'll be followed by the description of the financial reporting concept. The inclusions or exclusions would come next. If they are available, then the format piece would be last. I have some examples here, but I'm going to skip through those in the interest of time. And I want to talk briefly about our mini-guide series. We are focused on helping users understand what we intend when we model something a certain way. And with that in mind, we are starting down this path of creating what for the moment we're calling mini-guide series. The first one that we're working on is for stockholders' equity, and it illustrates a variety of scenarios that you see here. These are common scenarios that we have seen within different financial statements, not just XBRL filings, but the financial statements themselves. So we have scenarios where multiple facts are being reported per line item. We've got prospective and retrospective application of changes, correction of an error, and so on. So that mini-guide is currently in process. We've been working on it for a while, I'm afraid to say, but we, putting aside a technical issue we need to deal with in the short term, we expect to have that published very, very shortly. And then another one we're working on is subsequent events. This is intended to help users understand what is a fairly fundamental change in how we structured or how we intend to see the subsequent event dimension or axis used going forward. In the past, you could think of the subsequent event dimension being used to disaggregate events. We are now using the subsequent event dimension to actually identify, to disaggregate, if you will, to identify all of the subsequent events that are being reported within the filing. With that, I will now pass this back over to Jordan. Jordan, it's back to you.
Now that we've seen some of the 2012 changes, we actually want to walk you through our product and show you some of our support for the 2012 taxonomy and some very specific examples. With me, I have Seth Goldstein, pre-sales engineer. He shows the product on a regular basis, and he's more qualified to demo this product for you than I am. I'll walk you through some of the details of the conversion changes, and Seth is going to show you more of the feature highlights of Crossfire. So thank you, Seth. Take it away.
Thanks, Jordan. So what you're looking at right now is our Rivet Content Management Center, or CMC for short. This is the portal that you'll log into to launch the local version, which resides on your computer, of Microsoft Word and Microsoft Excel with our Crossfire add-on. Now here, there's also some added functionality in the CMC. You have full visibility of all documents that you're working on. And within Word, you also have full visibility of all the content sections, which allow you to work in a collaborative environment. Now, the nice thing about the CMC as well is the fact that You have full visibility of the status of any one of those content sections. And you also have an activity log of all changes that have been made and by which user. With that, I'm going to launch the software, and we're going to go ahead and review the conversion from the 2011 taxonomy to the 2012. Now, the first thing as a self-filer that you'd need to do is actually contact Rivet to let us know that you do want to convert from 2011 to 2012. At that point, we will actually convert the taxonomy for you. So then the next time you launch your document, you actually need to go ahead and review the changes that have been made from 2011 to 2012. So what you'll see right now when the document launches here is a pop-up asking you if you do want to review those changes. You'll go ahead and say yes. And from here, I'm going to pass it over to Jordan, and he will take you through the changes that are being made here to the taxonomy.
Great, thanks, Seth. So we can see this conversion dialog box. This is going to maintain everything that happens when you convert from 2011 to 2012. It's kind of the approval process for saying, I'm okay with this definition change, or there's an element that's been deprecated and I need to pick a replacement. It's all going to be housed in this dialog box. We can see that there's a number of types of changes. The FASB made quite a few changes to definitions and labels. Generally, we say those are less impactful to the filing. And so what we've done over here is kind of pre-populated anything that's a label or a definition change. And that allows you to click Apply or OK and make comments in your document about the types of changes. For example, the amended flag. You can see down here the 2011 value and the 2012 value. Basically, they just changed the word as to is. That type of change wouldn't impact whether or not you use the element. And generally speaking, if the FASB is going to make you consider an alternative element, they'll deprecate that element and give you a replacement. So here we see a definition change. Let's look at another element. This one has a definition and standard label change. All these pre-populated values are put there so you can review and apply these changes to your source document much more quickly. So I'm going to click Apply and see what happens. Applying these changes will save the taxonomy and the folio. Do you want to continue? I'll say yes. And what Crossfire is doing now is not actually making changes to your taxonomy, but applying comments about the 2011 to 2012 conversion in the folio where those elements are applied. So I'm going to move this dialog box out of the way, but you can see I've finished half of my review. This scroll bar is much smaller now. Now all I have to deal with is data type changes, period type changes, or deprecated items. And so what we've done here is not populated the value. We're going to make you review it in a very strategic way. But before I move on to a couple of those examples, I just wanted to show you what Crossfire does once you click the Apply button. In Crossfire, we have a number of review tools and filters. Under my folio review option, I can filter to a lot of items, one being a conversion or comment type equals conversion. So I just wanted to show you the comment type equals conversion and exactly what that means. So there's this conversion option. When I click OK, the folio review is going to show me all the updates I just made, where they apply, and I'll just show you an example. So it looks like the definition of property, plant, and equipment gross has changed. So if I look here in this comment details box, and unfortunately the real estate is kind of interesting. So I can see the definition at the original value, and if I scroll down, I can see the replacement value. System-generated comments, to me, is a very valuable part of conversion because you have your work papers now. You can export this out to Excel. Seth, I don't know if you have any color on it, but it's system-generated. That way, you can know what tags were applied automatically by our system during conversion, and then you can save those and use those for your work papers. If we go back to Crossfire, and the utility is called Find Replace Conversion, I'm going to find and replace some elements. Some elements are going to get deprecated and replaced by new elements, so we have a Find Replace Conversion option. And that brings me back to the dialog box that I had previously opened. I'm going to show you a couple of changes. There's an element, say, business acquisition effect date of acquisition. I can see that the old value had the old label was just business acquisition effective date of acquisition, and the new label includes information about the element's deprecation. Also, the FASB provides a deprecated label. We show you the deprecated label right here, and it says the element was deprecated because it has date string item type, or date string item type, and it recommends a possible replacement. So we've kind of automated that as well, and we suggest the automated replacement for you. If you select it, it will populate in the field over here. Before you select it, you can review kind of what the information is about it. We see that this one's changing to date item type. So it's changing from date string item type, and FASB recommends a new element that's date item type. I'll click OK. And we give you a message that just kind of warns you about the change. If you're a technical person like me, you know date string can accept more values than date item type. Well, I've picked the replacement that FASB recommends, and I know that my utility is going to do a system-generated comment now once I click Apply. But what is it going to apply to? If I double-click the multiple changes or this orange field, it will actually show me in Crossfire what this date is applied to. So this is the acquisition date, and it's in the format June 21st, 2011. Crossfire recognizes that, and it puts it in the proper format for the date item type. A little bit technical. If you ever had any questions, you could reach out to your Rivet support team. But that one's basically going to apply there, and there's no complications. In the 2012 taxonomy, however, there are a few duration item types, and I'll try to show you one now. Here's an element, let's see, called, oops, that's not the one I want. Here's an element I wanted to show you where the deprecated label recommends multiple elements. You can use allocated share-based compensation expense or employee service share-based compensation allocation of recognized period cost capitalized amount. That's a mouthful. Again, we populate the values that FASB suggests in our conversion dialog to make it a more efficient process. But say you didn't want one of those elements, or maybe something was tagged in a way unexpected. You also have the option to choose from any replacement element. And on occasion, FASB won't recommend an element, and you'll want to go to the All Replacement section and pick the elements that you would like to use for any deprecated item. So I'll select that one. I wanted to look at one of these elements that are changing to a duration item type. So I'm going to double-click this one. Oops. I have a couple of values that are expressed in a duration of time in years. I actually wanted to show you the 7.4. So the 7.4 is a duration of time. FASB kind of introduces this duration type element, and I'll walk you through the changes. It says we're changing from decimal item type to duration item type. In 2012, we know FASB updates a lot of elements from decimal to duration because the duration item type has a more impactful value to the data analyst. So I'll select it. I can also double-click to see where it's located. And there's a special format which duration item type has to be in. It can't be in 7.4. The value, any element that's a duration item type won't accept that value. It actually has to be in this strange PY, MY format. We could give you all the guidance. Just feel free to reach out to your Crossfire support team. But for Crossfire Word, you have an option. You can go to Settings and select Row, Column, Cell Properties. And I've actually entered this alternative value that is supported by the duration item type. So it's 7 years, 4 months, and 24 days is what 7.4 rounds to. That's very complicated. It's something that the FASB introduced and that we should use in the base element. And that's why you have experts at Rivet to help you understand some of these very technical changes. However, the simple part about the conversion is once you select the element, you get the warning message, and that change will automatically be applied in your comments, in your folio review comments to the 7.4. Those are the major examples I wanted to show you, some very technical specific examples. And with that, that's pretty much the product side. My contact information is up on the screen. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I want to thank Seth for joining us, and especially Louis Matherne from the FASB for joining us. And please reach out, let our team know if you have any questions or if you want additional information. Thank you.